Hey guys, it's me back with another good story. We're starting a brand new story today, and I have some special things that go along with this story actually. The story that we're starting is The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, and this is one of my favorite stories that I've read multiple times with multiple groups of kids because it's just a great story. Now, before we start, I want to give you a little heads up. So, this book is mainly about a toy. Kind of reminds me of Toy Story, but a little bit different. Um, but it's about this little stuffed rabbit, and it shows his journey throughout his life as a toy and what happens to him on this miraculous journey. And what's crazy is I've read this book several times, and it's definitely one of my favorites. Kate DiCamillo is a fabulous author, and she does a great job in all of her stories, but this is definitely one of my favorites. And I've got to tell you guys, Edward is one of my favorite book characters because he just embodies such good ideas and helps us feel all the feelings and have great things to talk about. And so I've always wanted to find my own Edward Tulane. And this kind of is a good picture of him. But I always wanted to find him kind of like in the book. I didn't want to go buy one. I wanted to happen across one. That way I had my own version of Edward to keep in my classroom and show to my students and help share his story. And so last summer, you guys are going to be so excited. I love to yard sale. And so I was at an estate sale and I was walking through this house, seeing if I could find any treasures that I couldn't live without. And I look down, and there's this little chair sitting in the kitchen of this house. It's like the dining room of the home. And lo and behold, right there in that chair sat my own version of Edward Tulane. So this is my little Edward, you guys. He has a little pocket watch, just like in the book, that's on his little lapel jacket here, and his little vest. And he's like a stuffed doll, but he's kind of tall. He's got pants. He's got his little outfit, and he was like my version that I finally found. And so my plan was to use him when I read this story. And so this is the first time that I've had him that I'm reading this book. So I'm going to keep him with me when I record these chapters because he is, my special Edward. And he found me. So that's kind of how I wanted it to happen, was not me going out to buy one, but happening across finding him, like in the book. So this is my little Edward. So when you see him in these videos, that's why he's there. So we're going to read chapters 1 and 2 today and get into his story and get to know who he is as a character, and I cannot wait. So let's get started. I'm going to try to keep him where we can see him. Maybe he can just sit with me on my arm as I read. We'll try it that way because I don't want to not include him. He needs to be present, right? So here we go. I'll try to show you the pictures as we go along because there are a few pictures in this book. We're not used to having pictures to look at, so I'm quite excited about that. Let me see. This first picture I think is a really good one. Make sure I'm not skipping anything good. Okay. All right. The Miraculous Journey of Edward Tulane, Chapter 1. Once, in a house on Egypt Street, there lived a rabbit who was made most entirely of china. He had china arms and china legs, china paws and a china head, a china torso and a china nose. His arms and legs were jointed and joined by wire so that his china elbows and china knees could bend, giving him much freedom of movement. His ears were made of real rabbit fur, and beneath the fur there were strong bendable wires, which allowed the ears to be arranged into poses that reflected the rabbit's mood. Jaunty, tired, full of spirit. His tail, too, was made of real rabbit fur, and was fluffy and soft and well-shaped. The rabbit's name was Edward Tulane, and he was tall. He measured almost 3 feet from the tip of his ears to the tip of his feet. His eyes were painted a penetrating and intelligent blue. In all, Edward Tulane felt himself to be an exceptional specimen. Only his whiskers gave him pause. They were long and elegant, as they should be, but they were of uncertain origin. Edward felt quite strongly that they were not the whiskers of an actual rabbit. Whom the whiskers had belonged to initially, what unsavory animal, was a question that Edward could not bear to consider for far too long. And so he just didn't. He preferred as a rule not to think unpleasant thoughts. Edward's mistress was a 10-year-old dark-haired girl named Abilene Tulane, who thought almost as highly of Edward as Edward thought of himself. Each morning after she dressed herself for school, Abilene would dress Edward. The China Rabbit was in possession of an extraordinary wardrobe composed of handmade silk suits, custom shoes fashioned from the finest leather, and designed specifically for his rabbit feet, and a wide array of hats, equipped with holes so that they could easily fit over Edward's large and impressive ears. Each pair of well-cut pants had a small pocket for Edward's golden pocket watch. Abilene wound his watch for him each morning. "Now, Edward," she said to him after she was done winding the watch, "when the big hand is on the 12 and the little hand is on the 3, I will come home to you." She placed Edward on a chair in the dining room and positioned the chair so that Edward was looking out the window and could see the path that led up to the Tulane front door. Abilene balanced the watch on his left leg. She kissed the tips of his ears, and then she left, and Edward spent the day staring out at Egypt Street, listening to the ticking of his watch, waiting for Abilene. Of all the seasons of the year, the rabbit most preferred winter, for the sun set early then, and the dining room windows became dark, and Edward could see his own reflection in the glass. And what a reflection it was! What an elegant figure he was! Edward never ceased to be amazed at his own fineness. In the evening, Edward sat at the dining room table with the other members of the Tulane family, Abilene, her mother and father, and Abilene's grandmother, who was called Pellegrina. True, Edward's ears barely cleared the tabletop, and true also that he spent the duration of the meal staring straight ahead at nothing but the bright and blinding white of the tablecloth. But he was there, a rabbit at the table. Abilene's parents found it charming that Abilene considered Edward real, and that she sometimes requested that a phrase or story be repeated because Edward had not heard it. "Papa," Abilene would say, "I'm afraid that Edward didn't catch that last little bit." Abilene's father would then turn in the direction of Edward's ears and speak slowly, repeating what he had just said for the benefit of the China Rabbit. Edward pretended out of courtesy to Abilene to listen, but in truth he was not very interested in what people had to say, and also he did not care for Abilene's parents and their condescending manner towards him. All adults, in fact, condescended to him. Only Abilene's grandmother would speak to him, like Abilene did, as one equal to another. Pellegrina was very old. She had a large, sharp nose and bright black eyes that shone like dark stars. It was Pellegrina who was responsible for Edward's existence. It was she who had commissioned his makings, she who had ordered his silk suits, and his pocket watch, his little hats and his bendable ears, his fine leather shoes, and his jointed arms and legs, all from a master craftsman in her native France. It was Pellegrina who had given him as a gift to Abilene on her 7th birthday. And it was Pellegrina who came each night to tuck Abilene into her bed, and Edward into his. "Will you tell us a story, Pellegrina?" Abilene asked her grandmother each night. "Not tonight, lady," said Pellegrina. "When?" asked Abilene. "Which night?" "Soon," said Pellegrina. "Soon there will be a story." And then she turned off the light, and Edward and Abilene lay in the dark of the bedroom. "I love you, Edward," Abilene said each night after Pellegrina had left. She said those words, and then she waited, almost as if she expected Edward to say something in return. Edward said nothing. He said nothing because, of course, he could not speak. He lay in his small bed next to hers. He stared up at the ceiling and listened to the sound of her breath entering and leaving her body, knowing that soon she would be asleep. Because Edward's eyes were painted on and he could not close them, he was always awake. Sometimes, if Abilene put him to bed on his side instead of on his back, he could see through the cracks in the curtains and out into the dark night. On clear nights, the stars would shine, and their pinprick light comforted Edward in a way that he could not quite understand. Often he stared at the stars all night until the dark finally gave way to dawn. This is chapter 2, and here's a little picture. These are shorter chapters of Abilene giving Edward a hug. I think Edward's enjoying our story so far. I can't imagine he wouldn't be. A story about himself, right? And in this manner, Edward's days passed one into the other. Nothing remarkable happened. Well, there was an occasional small domestic drama. Once, while Abilene was at school, the neighbor's dog, a male brindled boxer, inexplicably named Rosie, came into the house uninvited and unannounced and lifted his leg on the dining room table, spraying the white tablecloth. He then trotted over and sniffed Edward, and before Edward even had time to consider the implications of being sniffed by a dog, he was in Rosie's mouth, and Rosie was shaking him back and forth vigorously, growling and drooling. Here's a picture of that, if you guys want to see. That would be horrible. Edward is being all chewed like a little dog toy. I'm sure he was not happy about that. Fortunately, Abilene's mother walked past the dining room and witnessed Edward's suffering. "Drop it," she shouted to Rosie, and Rosie, surprised into obedience, did as she was told. Edward's silk suit was stained with dog drool, and his head ached for several days afterward. But it was his ego that had suffered the most damage. Abilene's mother had referred to him as "it," and she was more outraged at the dog who'd used the bathroom on the tablecloth than she was about the indignities that Edward had suffered at the jaws of Rosie. And then there was the time that a maid, new to the Tulane household, and eager to impress her employers with her diligence, came upon Edward sitting on his chair at the dining room table. "What's this bunny doing here?" she said out loud. Edward did not at all care for the word bunny. He found it derogatory in the extreme. The maid bent over him and looked at him, looked right into his eyes. She said. She stood back up. She put her hands on her hips. "Well, I reckon you're just like every other thing in this house, something needing to be cleaned and dusted." And so the maid vacuumed Edward Tulane. She sucked each of his long ears up in the vacuum cleaner hose. She pawed at his clothes and beat his tail. She dusted his face with brutality and efficiency, and in her zeal to clean him, she vacuumed Edward's gold pocket watch right off his lap. The watch went into the maw of the vacuum cleaner with a distressing clank, 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 and the maid did not even seem to hear this. When she was done, she put the dining room chair back at the table, and uncertain about exactly where Edward belonged, she finally decided to shove him among the dolls on a shelf in Abilene's bedroom. "That's right," said the maid. "There you go." She left Edward on the shelf at the most awkward and inhumane angle. His nose was actually touching his knees, and he waited there with the dolls twittering and giggling at him like a flock of demented and unfriendly birds, until finally Abilene came home from school and found him missing and ran from room to room calling his name. "Edward!" she shouted. "Edward!" There was no way, of course, for him to let her know where he was. No way for him to answer her. He could only sit and wait. When Abilene found him, she held him close, so close that Edward could feel her heart beating, leaping almost out of her chest. "Edward," she said, "I love you. I will never let you get lost again. I never want you to be away from me," she said. The rabbit, too, was experiencing great emotion, but it was not love. It was annoyance that he had been so mightily inconvenienced, that he had been handled by the maid as some inanimate object, a serving bowl or a teapot. The only satisfaction to be had from the whole affair was that the new maid was dismissed immediately. Edward's pocket watch was located later deep within the bowels of the vacuum cleaner, dented but still in working condition. It was returned to him by Abilene's father, who presented it with a mocking bow. "Sir Edward," he said, "your timepiece, I believe." The Rosie affair and the vacuum cleaner incident, those were the great dramas of Edward's life until the night of Abilene's 11th birthday, when at the dinner table, as the cake was being served, a ship was mentioned. So, Edward's world is about to change, and we're not quite sure exactly how just yet. But Edward lives a pretty awesome life. He has his own bed, his own clothes. Abilene treats him as though he is a real rabbit, and he prefers that. And instead of being kind of thankful and loving towards Abilene, he gets very frustrated. Like, he doesn't want people treating him like he's not real and important. And so when she finds him and rescues him from being on the doll shelf, instead of being happy and thankful, he's frustrated. How dare anyone do that to me? So that's kind of his attitude right now. But Abilene's getting ready to turn 11. And we hear that there's a dinner conversation about some type of a ship. And so something is about to change in Edward's life. So we're going to have to see what that is. He will be back with me next time when we read chapters 3 and 4 and figure out what this new conversation is going to be. But in the meantime, I want you to think. Our character, he is very proud of himself. And he very much expects people to treat him well all of the time. And luckily, Miss Abilene does just that. But what if that were to change? What would happen if that were to change? So, my little Edward and I are signing off. And we will see you next time when we read our next chapter together. You guys stay safe out there. Keep on reading, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.